a little over a year,
yeah,
I think.
About right.
And I have, every single time I interact with him, I'm more and more impressed. I've never heard him do a presentation. I'm super excited about it. But you guys, Isaac is an absolutely incredible young person. He has gone through so many amazing things in his life and has just really come out as an incredible person. He's done amazing things. He, by the way, was accepted into an Ivy League school, and guess what? He turned it down because he didn't need them, right? Anyway, he's not a great program for him. And that takes a lot, right? It takes a lot. And he has been training his staff at his school. He's a part of the Lighting Away committee. He is an incredible self-advocate. He's worked with some of my clients that I have had, and I have wondered why I was in the room, because he literally can do it by himself better than I can. And he also happens to have autism. So I am so excited to hear you, Isaac, and I'm so excited that you're doing this presentation. Enjoy, everybody. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, how do I follow that up? So, give me a lot to live up to. I'll do my best. So, today's going to be a little bit of something different, I hope, because a lot of the things that I'm talking about here are ideas that have been floating around in my head for the last year and a half, and they're concepts about how someone can hope to live to the best of their ability regardless of what's in their way. And these are just a series of lessons that I've learned throughout meeting a large number, throughout my own life and my own experiences through that, especially with autism, and it gives me a unique frame of reference. But a lot of these things I think are quite universal. But because of, where I come from, and also the fact that a lot of people I interacted with from a young age also were on the spectrum, and I feel that I see through that lens. And so when I think about how to try and live one's life to the best of their ability, I kind of come out with that lens. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys all about transition. For those of you who do not know, transition is the process of a young adult moving out of their home to go and live independently and pursue a new, whatever their new goal may be. In my case, it's college. For many people, it may be employment directly out of school. But whatever that may be, the process of transition is a very complicated thing, and I wanted to talk about some of the things that are involved in that. So I figured you guys would want to know a little bit more about me as a person. These are just some little things. If I had to sum it up, I'm a South Dakota farm kid at heart. You can really see it through just everything about me. And you do see a little bit of autism every now and again. I'm still just kind of, it's hard to see, but it comes out at times, and I've certainly been very, it comes out in a lot of my interests. It comes out in the way I interact with people. But it's certainly not what it once was, and that's the interesting thing, is it just throughout a lifetime of personal development and trying to find my way in the world, I've gotten to a point where a lot of people don't notice, but it's certainly still there, and it certainly impacts me every day still. I'm an extrovert, but I'm an incredibly awkward one. A very fun combination. It's certainly a lot of fun to be working in that. Just a couple, hobbies of mine. I like to lift weights, although I haven't for 3-4 weeks, and it shows. I'm an aspiring guitar aficionado. I like that word. It's fun to say. And I read a lot of books, mostly very highly pretentious sounding books that make me sound smarter than I am, because they were written in Russia 200 years ago. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of my experiences with autism specifically. A lot of my challenges were around social skills and emotional regulation. I had a lot of trouble, keeping myself in check, keeping myself in a good mood, and keeping myself, I fight people a lot. I'm just very, how do you explain it? I'm very, as a child, I was very stubborn, There's no other way to put it. And that just, that showed up a lot of time in emotional regulation problems. That's a lot of what I've dealt with. I have had some sensory issues in the past. There's a lot of time I carry around sunglasses and I'm wearing them indoors just because it's bright. I have been accused of various things because I need to wear sunglasses indoors, because there's a reason people do that a lot of the time, but whatever. I carry around headphones and stuff like that. Bright lights, loud noises, stuff like that. Self-regulation and management, getting things done on time. This presentation. And all kinds, I guess my point is I've seen it all for the most part. I've experienced almost all of the most common things that you see in individuals with autism. And between my own life experience and, like I said, the experiences of everyone else that I've known on the spectrum, I've been able to create a series of patterns that I hope gives me some ability to understand what's going on inside the heads of these people. So what I'm hoping to do is, towards the end of this, I'm hoping to save some time just for questions, because I've interacted with people online, social groups and whatnot that I found for like parents that need help, and I've heard good things from people that I've worked with, just regarding my ability to help them understand what their kids are going through. So, like, for example, there's this grandmother one time who, I don't know how much I should or can say, but her grandson had recently lost his parents in a car accident. She just did not know how to handle him and how to work with him. And I spent a little bit of time talking about what was probably going on inside of his head, just from some of the experiences that she told me about. And she tried to implement them, and she said, there's a long way to go, but I'm starting to see some changes, and I just felt so grateful. And so I'm just hoping.
Was that somebody on the spectrum, the child? The child,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, someone on the spectrum. And I just hope that I'm worthy of such high praise from people like that. That's what I'm here to do, is to try to be worthy of that. So towards the end, if you guys have any questions about just autism behavior in general, feel free to ask, and I'll try and give you some insight there. But I'll keep going on transition for now. I like to ramble, so I'll keep going. So why me and why now when it comes to the topic of transition? The main reason is that I'm obviously preparing for that transition in my own lifetime. I'm getting ready to leave my parents' house. I'm getting ready to go into college and into this whole new world that is totally foreign to everybody. And it's also because I have some qualifications that I think show that I'm hopefully ready for that move. I've spent some time living alone. I participated in Boys State. I was a South Dakota legislative page. I've been to camp. I just got back from a mission trip from Mexico, noticeably less tan than I had hoped. But my point is that I've spent some time living away from home already, and so I've got some experience as to what that is like. The hardest part is 4 guys sharing one shower. So, and then the next thing is just I know quite a bit about spectrum. I've been over this several times. I've just worked with a lot of people on the spectrum. So there's that. And then also, Emily was talking me up. I don't need to do it for myself, but I've gotten into some pretty, I got into Cornell. I got into UNC Chapel Hill. I was accepted into I think 3 or 4 like top 50 schools, and then probably a dozen other schools that I just applied to for fun. And you get a free T-shirt if you get in. So. Anyways, but I think I'm hoping that my acceptance into some of these places is some form of proof that I am ready to take on these challenges and to discuss it with others. So I already explained what transition is. We'll just skip over that. So what are we here to do today? I mean, we're here to talk about transition, obviously, but the thing is, I'm hoping to help formulate my own ideas here today, because a lot of these things I've never expressed in front of an audience before. I've never talked about with people, and so I'm hoping that, by having this conversation today, we can begin to formulate these ideas a little bit more clearly, especially because a lot of the people that need these ideas most can't explain them. I also, I'm just hoping that I personally, I'm an example of the fact that there is hope for these kids. You know, it was when I was a child, it was never expected of me to get as far as I have so far. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And then, like I said, just to answer some various questions about autism, because I hope that I've come to understand the mindset in a way that few people can. So, but the fundamental idea I want to discuss with you all today when talking about transition is that transition is not about compensating for autism's weaknesses. It's about playing to its strengths. So while I was creating this presentation, I was thinking regularly about some of the most remarkable people that have ever lived. And on the way here, I was listening to an audiobook by Stephen Hawking, and he was talking about Einstein and his development of the theory of relativity. And you know, Einstein was so brilliant that that's, you know, we describe brilliant people by calling them an Einstein. When your last name means someone's smart, I mean, you know you're pretty smart. But I was thinking about it. Einstein, obviously a brilliant scientist, but if he was trying to run a business, he would have been awful at it. He slept 16 hours a day. He was very obsessive over certain areas, and like definitely would not have the ability to coordinate, you know, the many different things that would go into running a business. He wasn't great at dealing with people, which is of course something you'd have to do with that. And my point is that if Einstein had spent his life trying to compensate for his weaknesses, he wouldn't have gotten very far. We wouldn't remember his name today. The point is to try and is to try and play to our strengths, to do things our way, instead of trying to do them the way that other people do, because that's the way that will work the best for us. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into a series of strengths, and I'm going to discuss each one and how they can be applied to a transition. So the first strength that I've seen in a lot of people with autism is very concrete and routine-oriented thought. So there's this book. It hasn't exactly changed my outlook on life, but it's certainly changed the way I live it day to day. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's one of the most best-selling self-help books of all time. And it's very well known. And in the first chapter of his book, he poses his viewer a question. He says, if a basketball coach ignored his goal to win a championship and focused only on what his team does at practice each day, would he still get results? And then he goes on to say that he thinks he would. And the point that Clear is making is that strong routines give us the ability to make progress even if we're not entirely sure where we're going or what we want to be doing. Now, I disagree with Clear a little bit here, because I think that if the team does not have the goal to win that championship, they won't try very hard in their practice. But the point still remains that routines are incredibly powerful, which is what I want to talk about next. Studies have shown that more than half of the things that we do every day are done purely out of habit and not particularly out of conscious choice. And this is something that bothers some people because they like to think that they choose all the things they do. But most of the things we do are things we don't really think about. And that's actually good, because it frees up our minds to think about harder topics. You can imagine if you had to think about what order to put your clothes on, and do I want to do left sock this morning, right sock? I don't know. The decisions, it's just, you don't think about that, you just do it. And that's the power of these systems. But if you optimize these everyday decisions, work on these habitual parts of your life, you've automatically covered more than half of your lifetime, and those will work out well by default. And that gives you a pretty strong platform to pursue other endeavors, because you have something firm to work as your foundation. Systems allow you to lessen the cognitive load of complex tasks. So one issue that commonly comes up in discussions of transition, I'm probably standing in the way of my slides, is the idea of, like cleaning your house, for example. That's something that a lot of people are concerned about in transition, is just doing the household chores. And because you have to say, okay, have I washed the dishes? Have I, folded my clothes? Have I done this? Have I done this? Is that raccoon still in the attic? So on and so forth. There are all these different things you have to think about. But it's a lot easier when you just say, okay, have I completed my routine where I do this on Monday and this on Tuesday and this on Wednesday? have I got all the things done for today? I don't know where on your routine raccoon hunting would be, but that would probably be, that's the reason you need a routine, is so you can figure out the harder stuff. That's the point of that, is to allow you to minimize the effort of doing these simple things. And then a piece of advice I have is to use schedules and not to-do lists. So on-the-fly time management is incredibly difficult for anybody. And most people are not robots. They cannot take a list of tasks and just do this and then do this and then do this and do this. If you guys have ever tried that, you would know that. It doesn't quite work that way. There's a little more conscious effort that is involved. And it's often incredibly difficult for someone on the spectrum to manage that. I've seen that in most of the people that I've known growing up, is that they really struggle to do that. What helps a lot is having a time and having a place and having an activity you're doing at that time and place. And it's very helpful to everybody, and especially to people with autism, to have that system and have things on their calendar rather than on a list. So I'd encourage you guys to work with calendars. So this is a system at work, and this is my own morning routine that I do during the summer. I've got a different one for school, but as you can see, it's just a list of things that I do at different times. And I actually have, I'll show you guys in a second, I've got this tacked up to my wall because I like having visual representations of things. When I don't do this routine, I have a pretty bad day, and when I do it, I feel a lot better because I'm just a lot more energized and focused and ready to go. When I have that period in my morning where I'm in control, I know what's going on and where things are somewhat automated. And so things like this can be used for all kinds of stuff, not just mornings. But like I said, they're incredibly useful to people on the spectrum, and I just wanted to talk about some of the things they can do. Like I said, they can help you keep the house clean. They can help you make sure you take medicines. I know that's a concern for a lot of people with transition, is making sure they remember to take any medications they might be on. We can help you with doctor's appointments. I put things on calendars just as soon as I know about them, because I'm not very good at remembering things unless there's a buzzer to indicate it. It can help you promote healthy living. If your habitual grocery shopping routine is to go and go into the aisle with the potato chips and the sodas and whatnot, then you'll buy those things and you'll eat them because they're in your house. But if it's, if you go and buy different things, you won't have those things because they're not there, because people are more likely to do, you're just more likely to do whatever is easier when it comes to simple actions like getting food. It also lets you, I call it guilt-free fun. What I mean by that is you can schedule time that you're doing things like for fun, and you're not just doing things when you know you have work to do. But when things are systematized and scheduled to an extent, then you know that things will get done because you've already planned them out, and you can enjoy yourself without feeling guilty about the things you're not doing. I've been playing a lot of games with my brother this past week when this was not done, so I'm well aware of that. I feel that feeling very well. And there's a lot of other things that systems can do. I mean, just endless things. I won't tell you about every single one of them because you guys can figure it out. But anyways, that brings me on to the next strength, though, because like I said, I like having representations of schedules. And that brings me to strength number 2, and that's visual thinking. Many of you probably know that it's very common to use visuals and representations and graphs and charts and things with people on the spectrum because it's just naturally how we think. And so I wanted to talk about those a little bit. So kids on the spectrum are often incredibly visual, and like I was just explaining, they have physical representations of tasks they need to get done in their day that help them organize themselves. Regular use of visual aids around a house, especially when you're not going to have parents around anymore to help you with this kind of thing, having these visual aids can help a student to accomplish just the daily upkeep of a home. So I wanted to give you some examples. Unfortunately, that does not look very good. But this is that morning routine I was just telling you guys about. It's just a little piece of paper that I've got tacked up to my wall. This is what I use to mark my, so I was talking about habits. When I'm trying to work with those, I've got a list of all the habits I'm trying to develop, and I'll just mark whether or not I'm doing them. funny enough, one of the habits on there is to mark the tracker. I missed that one. You'd think I'd be able to get that one. It's just, that's it. But anyways, that's what these things are for. It's because it can be difficult to start a new habit or to break an old one. And so having a visual representation is incredibly useful. And I've got all kinds of visual representations. This was mostly just that I wanted to show off how cool my guitars are. But it is also a form of visual aid because they're sitting right next to my work desk. And my rule that I often break is that I'm not supposed to have my phone in my room. And my guitars are right next to my work. I decide I want to break. Hopefully it's on the other room. Usually it's on like that. But because they're right there, that prompts me to do something that is more enjoyable as a break and also something that I'm much less likely to waste a whole bunch of time in just not doing anything. So things like this help me to remember the things that I said I was going to be working on, the things that I said I was going to be doing. And there's all kinds of different ways that you could use things like this to help you remember to take care of certain things that need to be done around a household. And these are things that obviously you're concerned about with transition. Then I just wanted to provide a couple of potential visual aids that you or your students or your children or whatever could use. So this first one, I'm sure this is by no means all inclusive. You know, I made this and I didn't really look to see to make sure that I had everything. But this is just a short checklist of some things that you might want to consider as someone is planning out their transition out of home and into a new place. And it's things like, where are you actually going to be living? Are you going to be living alone? Are you going to be living with roommates? Do you need assistance of any kind? If so, who's going to be living there with you? Is it going to be one of, some kind of, I wasn't sure what to call them. I just said social worker because I think that's the kind of person that would be doing work like that. But yeah, if you have some kind of assistant living in your house, you're going to take care of your health care, et cetera. And this might be helpful to help you make sure that every aspect of transition is taken care of, because as anyone who's ever packed a suitcase would know, it is very easy to forget lots of things that you end up needing later. So that brings me on to my next point. This is a routine maker. It's pretty simple: activity and time. The reason I even bothered putting this in was because it gave me an opportunity to talk about the idea of what's called habit stacking. So in order to explain this, I'll just explain kind of the theory of habit formation and repetition. So there's 4 main steps. There's a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward to any habit. I'll just use brushing my teeth as an example. The cue is anything that happens in my environment that makes me want to undergo a habit. So it could be something you see, something you smell, a certain time of day, a certain place. Of course, when you're brushing your teeth, you see your toothbrush on your counter in the morning is your cue. The craving is a desire for a certain outcome that you hope to attain by performing the habit. Of course, the craving for brushing your teeth is, the feeling of a clean mouth, that kind of, minty, tingly feeling that you get in your mouth. Fun fact: before toothpastes, before they had chemicals that caused that tingly feeling, nobody ever brushed their teeth because there was no strong craving to brush your teeth because there wasn't much of a sensation to it. And that goes to show how a strong reward can help influence habit formation. The third thing is the response. That's the actual physical activity, brushing your teeth. And then fourth is the reward, and that's hopefully the fulfillment of the craving. If you get that, then you're more likely to repeat that habit. And of course, when you brush your teeth, you do get that tingly feeling, and that's why most people brush their teeth today, and I'm glad for that. This next thing, this is what I call a lead-a meet, and this is something that's more meant for the student. See, when you're planning transitions, and I'll get into why in a second, I think it's very important that to the maximum degree possible, the person who is transitioning is in charge of the transition process, in charge of the planning, in charge of the formation of that structure that they are going to be inhabiting in the near future. And so the goal here would be, you give this to your student who's thinking about transitioning in the near future. Well, maybe not that near, I would think about I would probably start this process at least a year in advance, maybe 2 or 3, depending on what state the child seems to be in, and how much assistance you think they'll need in planning their transition. You just give them this, and you'd say, okay, put 2 or 3 things for what do they want to do, whether that's career-wise, whether that's their college plans, whatever that might be, where they want to be doing that, and then some things they're good at, some things that they're not so good at that they might need help with, and then the people who can help them, and that hopefully would be the people that would be in an IEP meeting or whatever that might be. But of course, once you've moved, then you're going to have a different set of people that you're going to need help from, and that's something else that needs planned before you leave if a certain amount of assistance is required. And that brings me on to strength number 3, because people with autism tend to have very intense interests, and that can be useful in the formation of goals. So most of you probably know that people with autism can get incredibly interested in fairly narrow topics, and often topics that are just sort of random and that very few people would share an interest in. But that's useful because people are, I say most productive, but probably more importantly is people are happiest when they have areas in their lives that they consider meaningful and important. I want to talk about a study that was conducted by the Harvard Business School. They were studying goal formation in order to increase the productivity of their employees. So what they did was they had 3 groups of employees. They had a control group where they just let the employees be as they were. They've got a second group where the employees were asked to set goals to make them a better employee. Whether that's making more coffee when you drink the last cup, or trying to do a better job on certain forms, or asking more questions in meetings, or whatever it might be, goals to be a better employee. And then the third group were just asked to set any goals that they wanted. And of course, there's a huge variety of the goals set here. There were relationship goals, there were fitness goals, there were even some goals to be a better employee, because some people ultimately truly want to do better in their work and enjoy their job, and that's totally fine too. I could go on and on about all the different kinds of goals that were set, but what was interesting was that the group whose job performance improved the most was that third group whose goals had nothing to do with being a better employee. And the reason for that is speculated, or the speculated reason for that, I should say, is that these people went from going through the same motions every single day, not exactly sure why, to having a goal in their life, something they could work on and progress towards. And when they had that, they felt a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives, and that boosted their mood and their energy and all these different things that contribute to you being a stronger, more productive employee. And so it's incredibly important to develop these goals, not because they are put upon you by some outside entity, but because they come from within. And that is true for the person and any outside entity that wants to put a goal on them, because the person improves the best when the goals come from themselves. And the thing about goals to me is, a lot of these employees before this study, their bosses said that they appeared unmotivated in their work. And I don't love the idea of motivation when it comes to, managing your life, getting things done in your life, and enjoying your life, really. Because motivation tends to only come once you've already started working, once you've already started moving towards a goal. That's where motivation comes from, is you see you're progressing. And so you've got to start somewhere. But what a lot of people lack is not motivation, it's just direction. It's just a goal of something for them to be working towards in their lifetime. And so when people have that, they tend to suddenly become more motivated. Well, at least that's how it appears. I don't think it's more motivated, it's just that they have something to work on. And so this is why it's so important that transitions are self-led. So, I haven't really had a transition meeting per se, because I was transitioned off of my IEP a couple of years ago. But, whether it's an IEP meeting or just, just a meeting with parents or family, whether it's a meeting with, teachers, therapists, whoever it may be that is involved in the transition process of someone on the spectrum. the important thing is that they develop their transition plan, because once they have something that they want to do, they will push towards it because they want to. And that will lead to the best outcome for them. And so, things like that visual aid I showed you to help a student plan their own transition, it's important that not, I see some people where like the students are present at the IEP meeting, but that's not enough. They need to, make them the chairperson of the committee, if you will. Let them be in charge of that to whatever degree it is possible for them. Obviously that will vary from person to person, because some kids are just more able to articulate things like that than others. But by using these aids, I hope it is possible for kids to lead the transition to whatever degree possible. So, if you want to see the best in a kid, you just need to help them pick a goal that they want to work towards, that they care about. That's kind of the main takeaway from all this. I don't believe that anyone achieves a goal without having any idea of what it is. Going back to what Clear said about that basketball practice, I don't think any team ever wins. No team says that they don't want to win and then win. That's not how that works. You have to have a goal and then care about it. And I've been talking about all this stuff. I'd like to give you all a personal example of a goal that I didn't necessarily have until I started working on an entirely separate goal. And that is my level of eye contact. When I was a kid, I never looked people in the eye. It was just something that I was very uncomfortable doing, something that I just didn't do for whatever reason. And people would tell me, look people in the eye, and I said, why? I don't care. I don't want to. Again, there's that stubbornness coming through. And I wouldn't bother. But I did have a goal to never use autism as an excuse and be unable to do things. Instead of saying, I had something really clever for this part. Instead of saying I have this, I wanted to say, look what I've done. I would a lot rather say look what I've done than look what I have. And so my goal was to have all the things that a normal person would have and want in their life, because I wanted those same things. Whether that's a successful career, whether that's building a family, all those things I wanted to have myself. And in order to do well at a job or to do well, with a family or whatever it might be, that involves a lot of communication and that involves a lot of eye contact. So when I framed my life within this larger goal that did not ever mention eye contact, I became interested in developing my own ability to do that, and that's when I developed. So you can't put that on me. You have to find a goal the person cares about and then help them see that oftentimes you want things that will work them towards that goal. Once they understand that, they're a lot more likely to engage in it. I wanted to give you a couple of tips regarding goals, however, because I see some people set ones that don't work very well. So the first thing I wanted to point out is that every Olympian wants a gold medal. All of them want to win, but not all of them do, because not all of them can. And the reason for that at the Olympic level is probably just that, everyone has reached the peak of what they are capable of, and it's ultimately just luck of the draw as to who has the highest peak. But not everyone wants to be an Olympian. If all you want is to be on your track team, you can do that, regardless of, I shouldn't say regardless. There's obviously some people that could not run, but for the most part, there are goals that you can pursue regardless of some level of talent, as long as you're willing to take action. So your goals have to lead to your actions. If your goal is that gold medal, that's fine, as long as you work to establish the actions that get you there. Because somebody else with the same goal and more action will come out on top. And then, in order to create these more specific goals, and which actually at this point goals almost become systems once they become something that's regular and involves actual action, which is where these two ideas intersect. I use what I call a goal matrix, and I'll explain that in a second. And that's on the next slide. But then I want to say, choose something that's just a little bit beyond realistic, because people are usually wrong about what's realistic. There's this quote that I've heard several times. comes up in books pretty often, and it says to shoot for the stars, and you might reach the sky. The point is, the higher you shoot, the more you can mess up and still have gotten pretty far. And so when you shoot for beyond realistic, you might still make it past what was realistic, because that's quite likely. You know, when I was a kid, I remember pretty well, I was probably 11, 12. So I was in elementary school until about 4th grade, and then I had a couple years of homeschooling, and then I had a couple years of schooling that was specific for people with mental disabilities, and then after that I was on an IEP for a couple of years. So I've got about 6 years of experience with special education. And I remember, and I've never been able to figure out why I was told this, unless the response I gave was exactly what they wanted. But I was told, you know, I was kind of told what was realistic for me. People said, well, you know, work hard, and maybe one day you can make it to your local college, you can finish a degree, you can go and, you know, do this or this or this or whatever. But there were these limits, and I was tired of them. I was tired of hearing that. And so, you know, I kind of made it my goal. I said, you know, I don't care what you say is realistic. I'm just going to do the best I can, and I'm going to go to whatever college I want. You know, I was told there was limits to what I could or could not do, and I got into basically everyone I applied to. So I showed them, and who knows? And I like to think that that was what they had wanted all along, was for me to say, you know what? No, I'm going to win. I'm going to show you. That's my motto. I'll show you. And I almost wonder whether that was on purpose. And if so, well played. And if not, I don't know why you'd say that. That's cool. So this is a goal matrix. Now, the idea of a goal matrix is that you take your highest goal, and then, but most often your highest goal will be, you know, to be something. You have to break it down into its component parts until you get from be something to do something. So for me, so this is a pretty abstract goal, because I think at a pretty abstract level of analysis, which is probably because I've read too many books. But I just think on a pretty complex level like this. But I'll talk about it in kind of more concrete terms in a second. So, but for me, the highest goal is to be someone who's admirable, who has admirable character. And I think to be an admirable person, you know, I broke that down. What does that mean? Well, for one, you have to have a strong sense of morals. You have to be someone who has strong moral convictions, someone who, you know, is going to try to do what's right, no matter, you know, regardless of the consequences of it. And the other part, well, there's lots of parts that go into it, but just for the sake of example here, I broke it into be moral and to be charismatic. If you want to be admirable, you have to be liked, but you also have to have a strong sense of morals. At least that's what I believe. And then, but these are still B's, so these need to be broken down more. So, say for example, you're talking about morality. You know, maybe that breaks down to have kindness, but you know, be kind to people, but maybe you also need to have integrity. And to be integrity, maybe you need to, you know, be respectful of other people, and you need to keep your promises. And to keep your promises, you know, you need to work on telling the truth. And so, that's kind of my goal. Is I try and be as truthful as I can, even when that gets me into trouble, because I believe that's what someone would do if they kept their promises, which is what someone would do if they had integrity, which is what they would do if they were moral, which is what they would do if they were an admirable person. And you know, you can keep breaking this down. You know, if you want to be charismatic, maybe you just want to look the best you can. And so maybe you know, wear clothes that fit. Maybe you'll work out every now and again. And you're getting into these actions. As you get into actions, you're beginning to come up with these component parts of this larger goal that you have. And you'll see, as you start at the top, you have B's, and then down here, you know, you've got E, wear, work, you know, tell, treat. You've got action verbs, not just states of existence. And that is the point of this. And that's how you create, I guess that's how you decide what should be in your systems, the kind of things that you should be doing once you've transitioned, the things that you should be working towards. You could even use this to prepare yourself for transition. Maybe your top goal is to be ready for transition. You break that down into, okay, I need to be able to know how to do household chores. I need to know, I need to have a job probably. I need to do this and this and this, and you break it down into all these different things, and eventually you break down into know how to do the laundry, and know how to wash the dishes, how to do all these different things. As you continue to break these down, you find actions that you can take in life that will bring you to your highest goal. And that is something that I believe would help a lot of kids. Kids on the spectrum, kids in general. Adults too, actually. Honestly, I think everybody could benefit from once in a while really evaluating the kinds of things that they want to do and how they can do them. Now, I have never attempted to create something like this with another student on the spectrum. That would be something I'd be very intrigued to try, is to see that, if working together, I could work with the kid and, maybe they say, I want to be an engineer, for example. Maybe that's what they say. I say, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And they can break it down into a few things and keep doing that. I'd be curious to see if that could be done, and with what level of assistance, and then what effect that would have. What effect would it have that there's actual actions you can take to work towards their highest goals? So to close this off, I just want to say, I think that every person I've ever met on the spectrum, they were stronger in character, they were more determined, they were smarter, they were more willing to go the distance than anyone believed, just as long as they had some purpose in their life. And also, I just want to say that I believe that people with autism see the world differently, but that they share the same vision for purpose and meaning in their life, and for, I don't even know how to describe it, there's a psychological term, self-actualization. That's just to become everything that someone can be. And that's what everyone wants in their life, regardless of how their brain works. They just want to be the best they can be. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for having this conversation with me today. If you guys have any questions, I'd love, just about anything autism, I'd love to do my best with that. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that, if you guys want to talk to me afterwards, there's a couple ways you can do that. So while I was finishing my senior year of high school, as part of my senior project, I was putting out this newsletter. It was called ASD and Me, and it was kind of a combination. It was a lot of the same messages I delivered to you guys today, and just in a newsletter format. And it combined, some research and a lot of personal experience and some of the wonderful comedy you all got to experience today. And it just had all these ideas that I had and were put in email form. I don't know if I have any intentions of continuing to work on that. I've thought about rebranding it and calling it, having one called Transition Trials that would just, once I start actually transitioning, just observing the things going on in my life and discussing what that could mean for people with autism. But if you guys would like to get in touch with me, or if you guys want to read the archive of all the old emails I sent, you can go to this URL, and that hopefully will take you to a contact form. And in this contact form, you can, well, first off, you can sign up to the letter, and then in your spam box, it definitely will end up in your spam box, because they have in the past. It'll be a welcome email to a mailing list that has these letters. And in that welcome email, there'll be a thing that says view archive, and you can view all of the old letters if you'd like to. And also, you can send me messages there, and they end up directly in my email inbox. And then I can respond to you from there. So if you guys would like to get in contact with me afterwards, you can do that. This is a Facebook page that I created for the purposes of autism stuff. I think my mom follows me and 2 other people. And I don't think there's any posts on there because I've never posted anything. I'm just in some groups and stuff. And I haven't checked it in about half a year. But anyways, I will be on that for a while after this, in case any of you guys want to contact me that way. You can contact me on Messenger or however you guys want to do that. So with that, I guess, are there any questions at all about you know, the kids in autism in your life or about anything I talked about. Yeah.
Isaac, thanks for what you had to say today. My daughter is on the spectrum. She's age 11. She's pretty bright, but that's kind of covered up by lots of behaviors and idiosyncrasies.
Sure.
And, I'm very interested in what you had to say about her setting goals for herself versus me setting goals for her.
Thank you.
So I have two things I'd like to ask you about. One is, how did you improve in your self-management skills? Because that's huge. And then the other is friendships. Have you developed a lot of friendships? Did you come out of a shell and were able to connect with people?
Yeah.
Okay, so answer the friends one first.
You want the friends one first? Okay. I was probably gonna do that anyway, so we're separate. So that's a difficult question. For me, because I am so unusual in a lot of my interests and unable to get into a lot of the same things that, so I come from a very small school. My graduating class was 17 kids. One day I'll meet someone who graduated from a smaller class, but it hasn't happened yet. And so when you're in that small of an environment, there's a pretty limited number of people that you can interact with face to face on a daily basis in order to have much of the way of friendship. But I will say that, well, first off, at larger schools, you can find people who are interested in everything. And does your daughter, does she, would you say that she's like, are her challenges that she's like struggles with her social skills, or is it more that she just doesn't enjoy talking to the other kids because they don't talk about the same kind of things?
Both.
Both? Okay.
Yeah, so we're working on the social skills a lot, but she's pretty happy being by herself.
I mean,
Yeah.
if she's happy by herself, that's not the worst thing in the, if you're happy like that. I'm not.
Yeah.
And so, to an extent, that it is helpful if the person's happy the way they are. However,
Isaac, I'm going to jump in here for just a second, interrupt you. I'm Scott Estabrook, Isaac's dad. A couple of thoughts occurred to me about that. One is, are you doing any social thinking groups, any kind of training like that?
Yes, currently, yes.
So, Isaac did social thinking group for a long time, and the results, the curve of the results would look very, very flat for a long time, and then they accreted pretty quickly.
Okay.
And I think what made the biggest difference was once the kids, he worked with Brittany Schmidt, who's brilliant at it, and she could give the same lesson for years, but until until the peers started repeating it to each other, that's when it started clicking, and that's when those things started happening quite a bit. So it might not look like much is happening for quite a while, and then there can be quite an improvement. One other thing I would touch on, because those years that you're in can be really difficult years. The result you're seeing right now would not be indicative of some of the trials.
I mean, when I was 11, I was probably about like that.
Yeah, that we went through, and there were some really tough things that to deal with, and everybody goes through that. So I'm not going to lay them out as to what they are, but what I would say is that the for example, in Isaac's in the couple of years that he spent at the at the school outside of Mount Vernon. He had discipline problems there. It wasn't exactly discipline problems, it was more like struggle of wills with one of the people there, and it was difficult for him to tell his mom and I about that.
One of the employees,
Yeah,
it's not one of the other
employees,
kids.
Yeah, and he spent a lot of time in an isolation room, really kind of suffering in there. And it
Probably
was,
about 2 hours a day at one point in time.
Yeah.
That was at its worst.
and the room was.
And wasn't, like you
Yeah.
said, not able to feel like he could tell us.
The room was, I saw it, it was like a dungeon basically. It was cold and it was cement and there was one light, and he was spending a lot of time in there. And after that, I had some feelings of guilt of not picking up on that sooner. But with some hindsight into it, and I may still feel that way to some degree, but I wouldn't take that away from him. There's a quote by Nietzsche where he says that, writing for his time, he said, a man with a why can endure any how. In other words, back to what Isaac was saying about goal setting, if you have those goals, you can endure anything, and the motivation of wanting to be out of there is what got Isaac, wanting to be out of that exact situation is what got Isaac back into school. And he knew being back in school meant he'd have to regulate his emotions better. The friends thing is tough because it's really hard to be, Isaac developed a lot, but it's hard to be a new person
With
when you were a third grader and you had meltdowns that people still remember that when you're a senior, you know, it's hard to move on for that. Yeah. So I don't have a great answer to that, but about the stress and the hard things you go through, if you look at them right, they become part of the motivation system, and you feel like if you're suffering for a meaning, you actually kind of enjoy it. I wouldn't say you enjoy the suffering, but there's a part of it, it's kind of like the pain you feel like from exercising or something, you feel like you're accomplishing something. So anyway, there's some hope in the tough part of it. I can't answer the friends part, but
Well, I was thinking your example about eye contact as a means to a goal.
Yep.
And I thought about that for her, making friends, being able to get along with people would be a means to whatever you're wanting to accomplish.
Do you know what she was like hoping to accomplish with her life, or is she not
hasn't
quite sure?
got that figured out yet.
Yeah.
She could be a veterinarian, she loves animals so much, and she likes science and art.
Okay.
You know, deeply into art, so who knows where it'll all turn out, but.
Artists are, a lot of the best artists are often people who face struggles like that because it inspires them and gives them a different material to work with. There's lots of songwriters where people said all the good music was when they were sad. I guess, but all I can say to that is to, you know, I would say, well, like for example, if she wants to be an artist, you know, she'll probably need a teacher or mentor of some kind. Has she ever taken any like classes for art?
Just in the school she's at.
Okay.
She's an arts-oriented school.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that's one thing is the best artists at my school were the people who had a close relationship with their art teacher.
Sure.
So I don't know if there's a good way to communicate that idea and to encourage her to try to build a relationship, because you know what my dad was saying was pretty much right. There's this interesting idea, well, like for example, there's this interesting idea in the Bible where it says, to those that have a lot, that all will be given, and to those that have nothing, all will be taken. And that sounds incredibly harsh and cruel, But the point is, once you have some of something, it's a lot easier. You know, you kind of have something that you can hoist yourself up from because you have something to hold on to. And so I would, you know, I strongly encourage you to, you know, encourage her to have someone she can look up to. That's something else that helped me a lot, was I had a lot of mentor figures, you know, people I wanted to be more like. So, you know, if she developed a relationship like that, you know, with an art teacher or with anyone that she could look up to in her areas of interest, that she might learn a thing or two from them just inadvertently. That's about the best answer I have for that, unfortunately.
Can I jump in on the friendship thing, do you mind?
Go ahead.
So one thing I will say, and Scott is right on and Isaac's right on in the fact that Isaac is not in an environment that really, you know, would it be conducive to him having friends. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of small schools are. However, knowing Isaac, knowing he graduated from social thinking skills, he's actually going to be a coach for social skills this summer, and so he has the ability, he has those skills, he just doesn't have the opportunity to use them yet. So I have zero doubt in my mind that when he is in an environment like the college that he's going to have friends. I have no doubt about that. It's just unfortunately not that you don't have friends, but you know, I'm not saying he doesn't have friends. I'm just saying in terms of, you know, unfortunately, once you have a reputation in those small schools, a lot of times kids won't turn that around, and it's not because of him, it's because of them. And he absolutely will have genuine back and forth friendships. So I want to say that because I don't want to make it sound like once you've kind of done this, your child is not going to be able to have friends in the future and turn that around. So, and Isaac, you know, obviously you can tell Isaac's a great, likable person. Yeah.
So I would just like to brag a little. We are not good friends with the Estabrooks, not because we're not good friends, but they live close to where I live. And I had the pleasure of doing I am a teacher, and I got to do a 12-week maternity leave when Isaac was probably 3-4 years old time. He doesn't remember me, but all of you that are teachers know you have your kids are your kids, okay? And some kids stick out, some kids, you know, you don't follow too closely, but being Isaac was close to the area. Just a few comments, if I may, on your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, I have worked with people who look at students in your situation or other special needs situations, and they do, I think of one person in particular, kind of put a cap on what those kids in her classroom could do, and it always made me mad because I'm like, who are you to tell them how far they can go? You don't do that with kids in your regular ed classroom, so why would you do that there? So I say, good on you to show them that. As far as your being awkward extrovert, Isaac, I don't know about the rest of you, but I find awkward extrovert a whole lot more interesting than a whole lot of other scenarios for people. And you made me laugh when you were 3. I was having a conversation with your mom out there, and I had one earlier with you. And you know, a lot of your situations where you get upset when you were little are no different than a lot of other 3-year-olds I've worked with in preschools, because maybe someone grabbed that sand tool or took your ball or whatever it might be. And one other comment that you made about normal people, when you figure that out, I think I'm almost 60, let me know, because I honestly don't know what a normal person is. I mean, I look around, that's my opinion.
Setting on a wash
I just
machine.
don't. What's that?
It's a setting on a wash machine.
Yeah.
That's all normal is.
And what is that even, you know, depending on what kind of wash machine you got, you know? Right, but, you know, the last thing, because I don't want to drag on here, but I am an elementary teacher, and that's a good thing, because that is about where I am smarter than kids. I talked to you earlier, and what you wanna do with your life, I mean, I can't even pronounce the words you were telling me of what you wanted to do. It just warms my heart to see kids that I've worked with, standing like this, or in whatever they're doing, and being successful and teaching us, because you have so many good things in there that made me stop and think. You know, I laughed about you playing games with Ethan, because that just made me kind of giggle, because some days I can look up and go, oh, it's 4 o'clock and I really haven't gotten anything done today. But when I do make a schedule, it does, so you've motivated me to do that, and I thank you for that. But if you ever wanna move from that career that you have, that I don't even understand exactly what it is you want to do, but it sounds so impressive. I really think that you would be a great asset to education and working with students, and not just students with autism, but just students, because you've got such insight, and yeah, I don't know, I just think you are doing great, so good for you.
Thank you very much. That was very, very high praise. Yeah, I appreciate it. Oh boy.
I was just gonna say, I don't know how much time we have, but just as she mentioned, your kind of right now the plans that you have for career in college. Do you want to tell people kind of what your thoughts are?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, I was accepted into Cornell but didn't go, mostly because it was cost prohibitive. I was hoping to be somewhat entrepreneurial with the degree I'd get there, but no entrepreneur can be $300,000 in debt before they start their business.
That's on the low end.
Yeah. So that's that won't work. I'm thinking about maybe attempting to transfer back in at some point in time after a couple of years at another college. What that degree would have been, it's called Industrial Labor Relations. And basically what I was hoping to study there, and I think I was talking about, I don't remember who I was talking about this with.
I was impressed.
Yeah. So industrial labor relations, it's a study of like labor law, labor culture, the history of the workplace essentially. And so a lot of people who go to industrial labor relations, they end up working in law or policy or politics. And there's a lot of people get involved in human resources. So what I was thinking about trying to do was to be like an independent contractor that worked to try and create hiring for people on the spectrum that were specifically tailored to positions that people on the spectrum might be strong in. You know, using some of these strengths, using the very organizational type mindset, the very numbers driven aspect, or the ability to focus on a task for a long period of time. All these different things that people with autism can often excel in, trying to find ways that you can employ them in a way that is beneficial to both them and to their employers. And that would be a pretty complex process, because you'd have to think about things like interviews. So obviously, someone with autism might have a little more trouble with an interview. So, equally skilled candidates, if one is neurotypical and one has autism, you may evaluate them differently. But the goal would be to create a hiring department that would be able to find highly talented people on the spectrum to fill certain positions, regardless of other factors that would otherwise throw off their ability to be hired. Because there's a huge number of people with autism that are unemployed. I think it's something like 80% of people, like adults on the spectrum, and I refuse to believe that many people are just not able to find work that would be beneficial to them, beneficial to the society around them. So that was kind of what I was hoping to do there. Did you? Yeah.
I guess I don't really have a question, but you are an intriguing young man, and I applaud you for being up there and telling us your story. Now I'm emotional. My daughter is 5, and we found out about 2 years ago she's on the spectrum, and I do everything in my power for her, and just to watch you, it's amazing.
Thank you.
And just to hope, you know, you give that hope to others, parents and grandmas and just, you know, teachers, and that those goals can be set, and that someday she'll be able to do those goals herself, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, my biggest fear now is that she won't be able to get to that point, but watching you today is, you give a whole new level to it. I'm sorry.
You're okay. I'm sure your daughter is far more capable than anyone believes. I believe that about it.
She's very smart. She can't communicate a lot of that, and we're getting better, and every day is different, but she's surpassed all her goals at therapy, and she's the light of everybody's life, and that makes me so much happier. And so, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Again, I'm sorry.
So I have a question after you talk. I will repeat what she said. If you do not want your career to work out where you're thinking, you should. But how do families or students get in touch with you? Because as you're talking, like, just thinking of families and students that are going through the same process of transition that you are, that even just hearing your story would help. Like, how do we get a hold of you?
There are these things that I mentioned. You can try and contact me on those. I don't know how likely I'm not on Facebook very often. I'm 17.
It's kind of old technology, huh?
It's not worth it.
But yeah, I mean, you can reach, yeah, if people want to reach out to me, that's kind of why I chose it, is it is kind of an older person's platform. Older.
We get
it. So you can sure look me up there. You can look up there. I check my email a little more often than I check my Facebook, so you can try that link. Is that working, by the way? Did anyone try putting that in?
Yeah.
Okay, did it bring up the, okay, all right, it works, yes. I made that this morning, I wasn't sure if it was going to. Yes.
So I just want to say, I used to be a speech teacher, and you did a fabulous job.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And I also have a daughter that's on the spectrum, and she's 25. And she is living on her own and everything, but you know, you don't start out to address your thing. It isn't always an easy path, and we had too some school issues by employees even that labeled, and all kinds of limitations for that. And yeah, you're doing the right thing. You should be a motivational speaker.
And kudos to Steph and Tanya too for your parents for what they did at being strong advocates for you.
Yeah.
Because that couldn't have been easy all the time for them either.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm certain, yeah, very grateful for that, that's for sure. But yeah, back to that, like I said, if you want to contact me, that top link's probably the way to do it. You guys could just email me too if you want. It's just IsaacEstabrook@gmail.com. It's not that hard to, I should probably change it because you can kind of guess what it is. Yeah. I've gotten some weird emails.
Yes.
Although I don't think it matters what your email address is, you just get them. But yeah, you can absolutely come talk to me that way.
You have a fantastic sense of humor.
Thank you. Yeah.
I want to chime in one more time just for the parents with younger people. A few things either that I know now or wish I would have known when Isaac was younger. One bit of practical advice when Isaac was having a really tough time at school. He was interested in chess at the time, and we made a lot of effort to bring him to to Sioux Falls every week to see a chess teacher, because for a while that was about the only thing he could do. That because in school he was in trouble every day. The school was calling us every day, and we'd have to go in and anyway, it was one piece in his life that he wasn't in trouble while he was doing, and he was enjoying. It was important to back to the Matthew 20 principle Isaac was talking about earlier. If you have nothing, it's really tough, but it was just one little thing. So if you can keep one emotional piece, pristine or good, that's very helpful. That helped get him through that. Isaac was sounds like your guys' kids are older than this, so it's probably something more for younger kids, but Isaac was late speaking, and I think what made him, I don't know how it would have turned out had this not happened, but when he was very young, 2, 3 years old, he just wouldn't talk most of the time, and if I would spend about 2 hours alone with him at bedtime, after about 2 hours, then he would start to talk. And I always have wondered, had I given up at an hour and a half every day, if he'd have never gotten that practice, where that would have happened. So anyway, that's another little practical thing. And I want to amplify a little bit that accretion of results, because you don't see results for a long time, and then in retrospect, looking back, you see where they happen. So anyway, it's well, to keep your hope up that results are happening, realize the value in the setbacks, the more they never do what they can do for themselves, and that takes a really long time. That's really impractical a lot of times, especially when you've got other kids in the house. But anyway, so it doesn't always work, but try not to do what they can do for themselves. So anyway, just a few things I feel like I could do a lot better job if I had a baby Isaac now than I did then. I don't know if that's true, because some of the mistakes you made are what shaped him, so.
I thought I had while you were talking about that. I don't remember what it was. Well, for one thing, you were talking about the, about those chess tournaments that I was involved in at the time. That comes back to, that's kind of that third group of employees. When you have a passion for anything, you have something to work on and to build on in every aspect of life. So I would encourage you to, no matter what it takes, have something. No matter what it takes to uphold that, no matter what it takes to defend it, it's important that you have something to build that on. And another thing, this presentation, it was somewhat designed with autism in mind, but it was also made, so you know how in airplanes they say to put on your own air mask before you help anybody else? Because once you have your own air mask, you have the strength to help others. And so a lot of what I talk about today in allowing people on the spectrum to live better lives, I've seen it's applicable to large numbers of people. So I would encourage you to the strongest degree possible, if you're working with kids on the spectrum, to get your own affairs in order to the extent that you have the strength to be able to help them. And it also, by doing that, you can be it becomes aspirational for the people you work with. That was something I had a lot in my life, was I don't remember ever having a period in my life where there was no one I could admire and look up to. And when you have that, you have, a role model is a form of direction. It's a form of goal in a way, to be more like somebody else. That could be at the top of one of those matrices I showed you guys. So both of those things I would strongly encourage you to consider.
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
One thing I loved about your you're doing, what you're saying is that you're empowering, or you really stressed empowering people with autism. And, even though like, if you don't have big choices, you asked if what they can do, how can you get them to start setting their own goals? If you even empower somebody with even a small choice to start out with.
Yes.
And then move it up.
Right.
Like my daughter, I said, hey, would it take a bath or a shower tonight? She either ended up with the same goal, but, it's a small thing.
Right.
And I think that's kind of how you have to start with.
Yeah, to the highest degree possible can mean incredibly small. If the goal is to give them as much autonomy as possible, that amount is going to be very small at some point in time. Even neurotypical children, like the first couple years of their lives, you don't give them any autonomy because they're gonna, walk over and fall down the stairs. That's what happens if you let a 6-month-old make all his own decisions. Or that's when you have kids running around restaurants screaming or whatever. I love kids. I work with them in church every Sunday. I love them, but boy, they can be a handful. But when so it's like obviously starting small, but that's the thing. I say that to people. I say give them autonomy to the greatest possible degree, and they say, well, they're not that autonomous. That's fine. It's to what degree is possible, and well, to go back to my goal setting, a little beyond what you think is possible, because it's probably a little more than you think. And also, there's no other way to grow.
Exactly.
So, I guess is there any? I don't know how much time we have left. I don't want to keep you guys.
I have to ask.
Yeah.
Did you have a raccoon in your?
No,
okay. Have you ever raccoon hunting or anything? It sounded like you were speaking
We
from
did have a
experience.
raccoon in the
Yes,
house when
yes.
Bailey brought that baby raccoon home.
Yeah.
So I guess technically, yes.
Yeah. Or do you remember the one time you and me and Ethan, we all ran out? There's this. We live out in the country, and so you get animals around sometimes, just because they're not as scared of that as they are of the city. Remember what was the deal? There's a raccoon climbing around on one of our decks, I think. And we all came running out. I think you had a metal pipe and I had like a wooden plank.
Are you talking about the beaver?
No, it was a rat. It was a rat.
That's a different story.
I thought they climb the gutters and then they're up on the roof. So they're not in the attic, but they're.
So I suppose that's one way to. I didn't expect to say today that I've hit a raccoon over the head with a wooden plank. The things that happen in a speech. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions about?
Are you sure you're not a time traveler? Because you honestly seem like you're like a wise old man. It's a little embarrassing for the rest of us sitting there going, how do you know that?
I don't think so. Not since I last checked.
Good luck.
Thanks,
Alright, thank
Yeah.
you.
Did you?
I'd like to say thank you to the parents that recognize and accept Isaiah and the work that you have done to support and encourage him. If you could just start an educational format for parents, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
It's the social thinking group. You'd always get to sit with other parents during the time that they were there. That was always a really valuable time too. So anyway, that's it's kind of the same as the peers. When you can read it or you can hear it from somebody else who's going through it, it makes a big difference. It's the same as how the peers learn from the other peers instead of Brittany, who's brilliant. But when another 11-year-old says it, then it clicks.
All right.
I think.
Thank you.